Greetings, all! Today, we'll be examining the members of the legendary Creation Trio, including the Steel Dragon-type Pokemon Dialga, the Temporal Pokémon, the Water Dragon-type Pokemon Palkia, the Spatial Pokémon, and the Ghost Dragon-type Pokemon Giratina, the Renegade Pokémon. With powers that surpass that of almost any other beast out there, and tied to the very foundations upon which our universe rests, the members of the Creation Trio are literally the beasts that keep the universe functioning in a stable state, and for the betterment of all, if only indirectly.
Dialga takes on the form of a massive quadrupedal beast covered in thick blue metallic scales, with light blue accent markings across its legs, long tail, neck, and head, with a trio of thin metallic gray nails adorning its feet with a tail fan, neck spines, and the crest on its elongated head made with the same sort of material. Its head is further noted for the crown extension that covers part of its mouth, with several sharp teeth visible in its lower jaw, its form made even more distinct by its pinprick black eyes, red sclera, and its grey spiked chest plate, which houses a shimmering blue diamond at its core. In its origin form, Dialga takes on a form much closer to that of the creator Arceus, with a more jagged and uneven dark blue quadrupedal body, mutated legs with downward-facing barbed extensions on its claws in front and reduced, single-pointed back legs, a mouthguard similar to that possessed by Arceus, and a light blue ring that wraps around its waist with 4 spear-like extensions on it, as well as 2 on its front knees and head. The most notable change, however, comes in the position of its chest crystal, as the object has moved up and is embedded in its neck as part of an elongated pentagonal attachment with parts of the gem's interior core exposed. Palkia has a draconic form to it as well, though it is primarily bipedal in nature, with whitish-pink fur covering most of its body, save for purple-colored smooth ridges that cover its underside up to its grey belly, feet, long tail, hands, shoulders, and neck. Its feet having 3 large white claws in the front and the 4th smaller one underfoot for stability, as well as 5 clawed hands with ribbed forearm plates hiding the black internal flesh of its form. It has an elongated neck and short head, with a mouthguard and sharp teeth visible in its upper jaw, along with pinprick black eyes with red sclera, a pinked ribbed face, wing-like extensions off the back of its shoulders, and a pair of rounded hemispheres attached to said shoulders, with purple markings and a large pearl in the center of each plate. In its origin form, Palkia takes on a form much closer to that of Arceus as well, with a more elegant and centaur-like purple-tinged quadrupedal body, with 2-toed front feet and 5-toed back feet, a mutated posture, a mouthguard similar to Arceus, a series of concentric purple rings around and attached to its waist, and a series of ribbed extensions on its front feet with the addition of a tail fan. Perhaps the most notable change comes with its arms, as it loses them completely and is left with little more than its rounded shoulder orbs with a deeper, more reddish hue to the pearls in its centers. Giratina takes on the form of a massive 6-legged dragon of sorts, with grey scales covering most of its form, save for black accent marks along its body's length and long tail, as well as gold-bladed bands across its ankles and 3-toed feet, not to mention the 3 series of bladed coverings that surround its neck, the front of said neck having a pattern of black and red stripes along its front. Its head is a gilded multi-bladed crown of sorts that covers the top and sides of its head, with a portioned mouthguard close to its black face, pinprick black eyes with red sclera, and additionally has a pair of black, ragged, shadowy wings on its upper back, with a series of 3 large red spines at parts of the tips of each wing. Lastly, in its origin form, Giratina loses its legs completely as it takes on the form of a massive serpent of sorts, with a series of massive gilded spikes taking the place of its legs, as well as 2 secondary piercings at the end of its serpentine form, bands of black and red stripes spread out across its form. In addition, its wings have changed shape and form dramatically, splitting into a series of 6 elongated shadowy appendages with a single red spike at the end of each appendage. According to the legends of the Hisuian and Sinnoh regions, the creator of the universe, Arceus, was born from a great cosmic egg before the universe ever existed. Shortly after birth, it used the power of the unknown to create the universe as we know it, and in turn, it created Dialga and Palkia to rule over time and space together, and, for reasons that still remain unclear to physicists, created Giratina as a living embodiment of a strange form of matter. After this, a single egg was made that contained the lake tree of Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, to not only carve the essence of knowledge and emotional willpower to give existence of life as we know it, but even more specifically, to help counter Dialga and Palkia if they were ever to go out of control, possessing the power to craft the likes of a red gem that has the power to make objects like the red chain to contain and control their rage, and make them come to their senses in case they are ever put into a state of frenzy. In ancient times, the human occupation of the Hisui region, Arceus rained down 10 bolts of its light to transform Pokemon in the region, and taking up the challenge, a single man, the hero of Hisuian legend, gathered these 10 Pokemon and used them to challenge Arceus and his avatar, and in winning, brought prosperity to the people of the land, known today as the Celestica people. These humans were granted audience with not just Dialga and Palkia, but also Giratina, and they built great temple complexes and statues to honor not just them, but the noble Pokemon of the hero's team, and even alpha Pokemon within the Coronet Highlands and parts of the Crimson Mirelands. For a time, it seemed that the people of the region were able to live in peace with the Pokemon of the region, but this would not last forever. As the statues of the Pokemon were built, it seems to be in a vertical display of worship. By this, it is meant that the higher in elevation along Mount Coronet the statues were built, the more they were revered with importance by the Celestica people, with the Temple of Sinnoh hosting the statues of the 10 noble Pokemon at that time, and the pinnacle of it all reaching out to Arceus. However, a problem emerged here as the statue of Giratina that they built was built closer to Arceus than any other, the noble Pokemon being the only exception. This led people to worship Giratina as a being that was more powerful than the other members of the Creation Trio, and given that it too can energize other Pokemon with life from its own being like Arceus, the reverence is understandable. Perhaps fueled by the people that worshipped it with such reverence, Giratina saw itself as being worthy of even greater reverence, and chose to rebel against Arceus in an attempt to usurp him as the greatest of all beings in the universe. But the rebellion failed, even as Giratina managed to use his power to place many Pokemon in a dire state of frenzy out of anger. Its rebellion would lead to the creation of the Distortion World, where Giratina was forced into in a state of exile. In fury, it lashed out, using its power to open rifts in space-time in order to send its power into the world once more, sending others into a state of frenzy that would lead to it effectively killing most of the Celestica people in retaliation. In the aftermath of this, what little of the Celestica people that were left chose to destroy any evidence of Giratina's existence, including the statue that had spurned the events of the disaster from the onset, and they were forced to live without the light of Arceus bathing them once more, a punishment for supporting or even instigating Giratina's rebellion. In time, people would come from regions far from them, and would take the name of the Celestica people as their own, despite not being the true inheritors of that name, forming the Diamond and Pearl clans. And while they argued for a time over who was the true inheritor of the titles of the people of Sinnoh, the name given to Arceus in ancient times, it is known that they would eventually put their differences aside. Nonetheless, the true Celestica people were left to die slowly outside the glory they once shared with the Pokemon of the region, and today, only the true descendants of the Celestica people reside in the people of Celestic Town, and in particular within the champion of the Sinnoh region, Cynthia, and her immediate bloodline. Although very little is understood about the actual anatomy of Dialga, its importance in the lives of every organism on the planet is beyond incredible, as it appears that Dialga's very heart is the source of all time, for its very beating seems to somehow force time to exist. The exact mechanics behind this power are still poorly understood. Regardless, this grants Dialga the ability to really manipulate time around itself to any degree, even going so far as destroying time within a given area. Dialga seems to be quite aware of its incredible power, and generally stays within a small pocket dimension referred to some as the Temporal Realm, a place where time flows freely in many directions and at different speeds, and enter a dimension that normal creatures can likely not safely travel through. However, Dialga does seem to have some considerable control over its own power, as it occasionally travels to the normal world without creating much in the way of upset. The actual extent of Dialga's powers is currently a mystery, but it is known that Dialga has access to one of the most powerful Dragon-type attacks in existence, Roar of Time. By focusing energy from its heart into the crystal on its chest, Dialga can create a temporary gravity well within its body that effectively halts time around it before firing the energy orally in the form of a concentrated beam. This blast of energy is so powerful that it can permanently damage the fabric of space-time around the immediate area and can destabilize cellular tissue in an instant, and turn reducing most lifeforms hit by the attack into a literal dust of frozen particles. Unfortunately, this massive distortion has the effect of slowing down time around within Dialga for a short period of time, effectively forcing it to recharge its energy before attacking again. It is also important to note that Dialga, much as with Palkia and Giratina, is associated with an artifact dubbed the Adamant Orb that is believed to have been constructed by the ancient inhabitants of the Sinnoh region. Though still relatively mysterious, it appears that the stone is imbued with the same energy that flows through Dialga, in turn powering up Dialga's steel and dragon-type attacks if placed within its immediate area. As a whole, Dialga is a fearsome beast whose mere presence tends to make others quake in fear, given access to pressure as its only base ability, though in cases where it can clearly communicate with others, it can also exhibit signs of the telepathy ability as a hidden ability instead. And given that its only weakness is a below average base speed stat for a fully evolved Dragon-type Pokemon, possessing the highest base special attack stat out of all Steel-type Pokemon, there is very little that it cannot do when called for. It is also important to note that in recent times, it has come to light that the form of Dialga is normally seen in is not in fact its true form, but an altered avatar that is better designed for interacting physically with reality most other Pokemon dwell in. With the powerful object known as the Adamant Crystal Orb, however, its true power can be unleashed, thus allowing it to enter into what is known as its origin form. Information on this form is fairly scarce, but it is known that this change in form causes some physical impairment to the offensive strength of the beast, as its frame becomes a bit more delicate, experiencing a moderate drop in its base attack stat, but as a consequence its form becomes energized with raw temporal energy, creating subtle energy shielding that in turn moderately increases its base special defense stat. In addition, this form has the effect of altering the execution of its Roar of Time attack, as when it is in this state, the attack is executed as Dialga creates and absorbs a series of time crystal splinters around its frame, which, while lowering the attack's accuracy rate severely because of the extra time needed to charge up and execute the move, also notably increase the energy output of the attack, the crystal in their neck acting as a powerful voice modulator in the process, and thus raises its base power to a moderate degree. While it is believed that the power needed to allow Dialga to transform into the state might be lost in modern times, this is not a certain truth, and it is likely that if it were to enter into the state again, its temporal powers may overflow and likely put the entire world as we know it at risk of total destruction, even if this form murders its base attack stat also below average for fully evolved Steel and Dragon-type Pokémon. Similarly, although very little is understood about the actual anatomy of Palkia, its importance to the lives of every organism on the planet is beyond incredible, as every breath that leaves the beast apparently stabilizes space and allows space within different dimensions to be separate and yet still connected to the entire multiverse. The exact mechanics behind this power are still poorly understood. Regardless, this grants Palkia the ability to freely manipulate the space around itself to any degree, even going so far as to destroy the space within a given area. Palkia seems to be quite aware of its incredible power, and generally stays within a small pocket dimension referred to some as the Spatial Realm, a place where reality is formed of strips and ribbons of existence and in turn is a dimension that normal creatures can likely not safely travel through. The actual extent of Palkia's power is currently a mystery, but it is known that Palkia can utilize its control over space to launch a devastating attack capable of literally tearing a hole in the space surrounding a target, Spatial Rend. Although Palkia is technically made up of normal matter, it can generate extremely small amounts of antimatter within the two crystals on its shoulders, which effectively act as super potent energy processors. Once a minute amount of antimatter has been generated, Palkia then coats the antimatter with a shield of energy before releasing it forward in the form of a crescent-shaped energy wave. When the energy wave hits something, it dissipates and allows the antimatter to come into contact with the normal matter in the atmosphere, generating a massive blast of energy capable of literally vaporizing everything in the blast's immediate vicinity. While not extraordinarily powerful in terms of sheer damage potential, the attack delivers such a concentrated burst of energy that the space around a target is effectively torn. In practice, this appears to increase the chance of the attack scoring a critical hit on an opponent. It is also important to note that Palkia, much as with Dialga and Giratina, is associated with an artifact dubbed the Lustrous Orb that is believed to have been constructed by the ancient inhabitants of the Sinnoh region. Though still relatively mysterious, it appears that the stone is imbued with the same energy that flows through Palkia, in turn powering up Palkia's water and dragon-type attacks if placed within its immediate area. As a whole, Palkia is a fearsome beast whose mere presence tends to make others quake in fear, giving it access to pressure its only base ability, though in cases where it can clearly communicate with others, it can also exhibit signs of the telepathy ability as a hidden ability instead. And given that its only weakness is a below average base HP stat for a fully evolved dragon-type Pokémon, possessing the highest base special attack stat out of all water-type Pokémon, tied with Kyogre, and base stat total out of all water-type Pokémon, there is very little that cannot do what it is called for. Much as with Dialga, it is further important to note that in recent times, it has come to light that the form of Palkia normally seen is not in fact its true form, but an altered avatar that is better designed for interacting physically with the reality most other Pokémon dwell in. With the power of an object known as a lustrous globe or orb, however, its true power can be unleashed, thus allowing it to enter what is known as its origin form. Information on this form is fairly scarce, but it is known that this change in form causes some physical impairment to the offensive strength of the beast as its frames become a bit more delicate, experiencing a water drop in its base attack stat, but as a consequence its now quadrupedal form is able to move about much more quickly and even run to some degree, in turn moderately increasing its base speed stat. In addition, this form has the effect of altering the execution of its Spatial Rend attack, as when it is in this state, the attack is executed as Palkia generates a ring of energy around itself that stabilizes the attack's destructive power, and while this has the effect of slightly decreasing the base power of the attack and removes the sharp slicing of the move so it no longer has a high chance of scoring a critical hit, the remnant of the energy ring is infused into Palkia as the attack concludes, increasing its internal energy reserves and focus, and in turn, severely increasing the chance of it scoring critical hits with future attacks, much more so than any other known move, item, or method is capable of. While it is believed that the power needed to allow Palkia to transform into the state might be lost in modern times, this is not a certain truth, and it is likely that if it were to enter into the state again, its spatial powers may overflow and likely put the entire world as we know it at the risk of total destruction, even if this form renders its base attack stat also below average for a fully evolved dragon-type Pokémon. While there is almost no information available in regards to the beast's anatomy, it appears that Giratina is utterly unique among all life forms on Earth and even its own brethren, in that its body is comprised of equal amounts of both normal matter and an unknown form of exotic matter possessing anti-gravitational properties, with its typical association with antimatter often coming as a result of general misunderstanding regarding its physical properties. While it is very difficult to detect this exotic matter as a result of its odd properties, the amount of normal matter within Giratina only accounts for about half of its total mass, leaving little else in the way of logical conclusions. This in turn grants Giratina access to many abnormal powers that will otherwise be associated only with ghost types, explaining its partial type assignment. That is not to say that other ghost types are comprised of a considerable volume of this exotic matter, however, as the amount of normal matter within them generally accounts for the vast majority of their mass. Interestingly enough, this composition also seems to reflect the properties of the beast's home dimension, the aptly titled Distortion World. In short, it appears that the Distortion World is a parallel universe that is literally less than an atom's length away from our own, separated from the world of normal matter that humans occupy by an unknown mechanism that seems to keep this exotic matter world from readily interacting with our own. The only true source of interaction that exists between the two worlds comes in the form of Giratina itself, as it is made of equal parts normal and anti-gravitational exotic matter. For reasons that are still unclear, however, because of Giratina's existence within both realms, direct damage to any of the bonds between the two, which can range from physical constructs within the Distortion World to the fabric of space-time within the normal world, will cause semi-permanent damage to both. As such, Giratina has become the enforcer of balance between the two worlds, much to its apparent chagrin, showing in text to have once harbored a desire to overthrow Arceus for its banishment, and will gladly place its own life in danger to protect the Distortion World and exact revenge on those who would dare to harm its world through harming the world everyone else lives in. As a whole, Giratina is a fearsome beast whose mere presence tends to make others quake in fear, given access to pressure as its only base ability, though in cases where it can clearly communicate with others, it can also exhibit signs of the telepathy ability as a hidden ability instead. And given that its only weaknesses are a below average base attack, special attack and speed stats for a fully evolved dragon type Pokemon, possessing the highest base HP stat out of all ghost type Pokemon typed with Driftblim, and the highest base stat total out of all ghost type Pokemon, there is very little that it cannot do when called for.
Due to the relative instability of its molecular structure and the way in which the normal exotic matter within its body interact, the form, powers, and abilities that Giratina possesses depend primarily upon the relative gravity of its location.
In the normal world, where gravity exists in a form that is readily understandable to humans, the normal matter that comprises Giratina's body is stable and can maintain a fairly solid physical form at all times that adheres to traditional gravitational laws. While in this form, referred to as its altered form due to the normal world not being its natural home, Giratina possesses only decent offenses but relatively high defenses, weighs what one would expect of a creature of its mass to weigh, and possesses the pressure ability. In the Distortion World, however, gravity appears to be warped due to the anti-gravitational properties of the exotic matter it is comprised of, and is unstable to the point of changing orientation randomly as beings made of normal matter travel through the Distortion World. As a result, the exotic matter within the body of Giratina becomes stable in its home dimension and transforms it into its origin form, under which its offensive and defensive stats are switched, its weight becomes much slower than its mass would suggest, and additionally acquires the Levitate ability. Normally, Giratina is unable to maintain its origin form outside of the Distortion World. An artifact known as the Grizius Orb or Grizius Core, however, believed to have been constructed by the ancient inhabitants of the Sinnoh region, is imbued with a mysterious energy field that can not only potentially power up Giratina's ghost and dragon type attacks, but stabilize the exotic matter in its body to allow it to maintain its origin form in the normal world, though this is still more speculation than anything. The actual usefulness of this item has been brought up in recent times as well, as some scarce records indicate that its physical avatar had the capacity to maintain its origin form on its own without the need of the orb in the past, and why this has seemingly changed in more modern times is uncertain. It is interesting to note, however, that regardless of its current location or form, Giratina is able to use its own molecular structure to deliver a devastating strike that is virtually unparalleled in terms of sheer destructive damage among ghost-type attacks, the Shadow Force attack. At any given time, Giratina can temporarily destabilize its molecular structure and enter a state of dimensional flux between the Distortion World and the normal world, vanishing from view for a short period of time. Once it gathers enough strength, the beast can then ram the opposition at full speed while still in flux before quickly returning to a state of relative stability. Aside from being the most powerful ghost-type attack recognized, Shadow Force is unique in that it can actually attack an opponent that is used to move like Protect or Detect and simultaneously destroy the protection, leaving them vulnerable to another attack. Moreover, the attack can actually be more powerful when used by the beast in its origin form at the cost of a moderate drop in its accuracy rate, though the might of it clawing its way through space-time to deliver it in that state is an awesome and terrifying sight to behold, especially given that it is only weak in speed as the fully evolved Dragon-type Pokemon in its origin form.
In recorded history, the members of the Creation Trio have played an important role in a number of major incidents, the first and most important of which being the Celestica incident.
Approximately 200 years ago, when the Sinnoh region was still known as the Hisuian region, a great calamity of a sort was brought upon the people of the land as a series of distortions began to appear all over the region, sending the noble Pokemon of the region into a painful state of frenzy and placing the balance between the people of the Diamond and Pearl clans and the Pokemon of the region into a tenuous state. A child that supposedly descended to the region from the sky, called into duty by Arceus himself, was tasked by the Galaxy team a group of explorers that recently set up shop in the region for exploratory purposes, with not only studying Pokemon in the region, but also calming the noble Pokemon in the hopes that would seal up the distortions in space-time to return the land to peace once more. But in truth, this did nothing of the sort, instead seemingly making the problem even worse. With help from Kogita, the last living member of the Celestica people at that time, the child was able to gather help from the late guardians of the region, and use that power to help create the Red Chain, an object that would seemingly be useful in calming and controlling whatever force was truly behind the distortions. Upon reaching the Temple of Sinnoh, it was discovered that part of the issue had been an enraged member of the Creation Trio, either Dialga or Palkia. The exact one has been lost to time, and while the young child was able to defeat and become Divinity, it was only then that the other member would make itself known, taking on the power of its origin form to best the child once more, but it too was eventually calmed and defeated, seemingly ending the crisis altogether. However, following this and the gathering of the many plates in the region said to house the very power of Arceus itself, it was revealed that a member of the local Ginkgo guild, Volo, had been the real cause behind all of this, for in a delusion of thought that led him to believe he was the last of the true Celestica people of times long past, he had contacted Giratina and convinced it to rebel once more, using its immense power under Volo's directions to tear open the distortions and send both the noble Pokemon and Dialga and Palkia into a state of frenzy. Volo had to do this because he wished to gain Arceus' attention in order to make the world again in his own image, believing it to be his birthright as the last of his people, even though it would later come to light that his thought was indeed just a delusion, and that he was not a member of the Celestica people at all. Confronting Volo as the first ever true Pokemon wielder of the region, a precursor to the modern Pokemon trainer, the young child was not only able to defeat Volo but Giratina as well, putting an end to his actions. In response, Volo vowed that one day he would have Arceus his own and would rewrite the world in his image before vanishing to parts unknown, while Giratina vowed to never try to rebel again and instead protect the world as we know it, ending the Celestica crisis once and for all. Following this in more modern times, there's the Alamos Town incident, during which Dialga and Palkia almost destroyed an entire town without any intention of doing so. Although Dialga and Palkia normally stay within their own realms without ever interacting, the Alamos Town incident stemmed from a chance encounter 16 years ago in which Dialga managed to find its way into the spatial realm. Even though time and space exist together as one within the confines of the normal world, Dialga and Palkia are so intensely oriented towards one side of the equation that they absolutely cannot stand each other. When Dialga invaded the spatial realm, it attacked Palkia viciously and managed to damage it considerably, forcing the beast to travel into the normal world in order to heal itself. Unfortunately, due to its wounds, Palkia could not fully control its powers, and its presence began to slowly warp the space in and around Alamos Town. The resulting disturbances were blamed on a local Darkrai, who was dutifully hunted by the town's inhabitants until Palkia revealed itself in conjunction with Dialga's appearance in the normal world. Because the normal world was never designed to take the temporal and spatial punishment the powers inherently cause, the fabric of space-time within Alamos Town became warped and eventually cut off from the rest of the world. Alamos Town itself possessed a pair of towers that were long ago built to honor Dialga and Palkia, with a special music box of sorts installed within as a way of playing music that everyone in the town could hear. The true purpose of the device, however, was to play a powerful melody that could calm even the most vicious of beasts in times of crisis. It is likely that the original designers feared what would happen if Dialga and Palkia were to ever meet one another and chose to plan accordingly. While the Darkrai involved in the incident used his Dark Void technique to hold back the two beasts before the attacks could fully destabilize the pocket of spacetime the town was now engulfed in, a small group of trainers managed to make it to the top of the towers and play the required music. Although they were too late to save the Darkrai from being destroyed, the music did in fact calm the two deities, allowing them to go their separate ways in relative peace. It was later discovered that despite how intense the temporal distortion had been in the area, the actual structure and inhabitants of Alamos Town were effectively restored to how they were before the incident began at its conclusion, with all of their memories retained, including the Darkrai that had sacrificed its life to protect its home. The events of the Alamos Town incident, however, did not do much to help the overall balance of the world, as the disturbance in spacetime apparently had the effect of filling the distortion world with toxic smog and infuriating Giratina. Dialga was thus also present during the Zero incident that following year, which stemmed off as a direct consequence of the Alamos Town incident, though only indirectly and only in its initial events. The third event of note is the now infamous Galactic incident that took place 14 years ago. The leader of Team Galactic, an intelligent 27-year-old man at the time, named Cyrus, despised the world around him because it was incomplete. In order to change it, he wished to create a world where he alone ruled without the painful emotions that riddled his mind from his childhood. In order to do that, in his eyes, he literally had to start from scratch. He had used Dialga and Palkia to make a new world free of spirits. Capturing the three Guardians of Life, Cyrus created a mysterious object known among some as the Red Chain. Though the artificial process used in making the chain as well as a second copy is long gone, it apparently had the powers of Uxie, Mespra, and Azelf imbued within it. Their combined powers, when used in the right place, could potentially open a gateway between dimensions, allowing Dialga and Palkia to pass through. Perhaps not surprisingly, such a specific place existed at the ruins of an ancient temple in the Sinnoh region, known locally as Spear Pillar. While efforts were made to stop him by a young trainer, the Red Chains inevitably did their job and successfully summoned both Dialga and Palkia. With these two creatures in his presence, Cyrus was essentially invincible. Although the three Life Guardians attempted to stop Cyrus, their attempts were in vain. The power of the Red Chain was simply too much. It would have been a complete disaster if Cyrus had remembered another legend that was long forgotten, the one creature capable of stopping him, Giratina. Sensing that a disturbance within our world would soon affect the Distortion World catastrophically, Giratina took the liberty of appearing before Cyrus and dragged him into the Distortion World. This broke the power of the Red Chains, allowing Dialga and Palkia to return to their respective dimensions. In the end, Cyrus was defeated within the Distortion World by the same young trainer that had tried before to thwart his plan. Giratina was calmed, and balance was restored within both worlds. To this very day, no other human has attempted to control Dialga and Palkia in such a way, and Cyrus remains MIA, lost within the Distortion World. Following this, mere months after the Galactic Incident, yet another event would serve as a reminder to the world that Giratina in particular is more than a simple monster, and is in fact a valuable component of our world, the Zero Incident. Following the events of the Alamos Town Incident, a black smoke likely generated from the temporal and spatial disturbances created from the interaction between Palkia and Dialga apparently began to fill portions of the Distortion World, the home dimension of Giratina. Infuriated, the beast attempted to grab Dialga, as it was one who started the fight, and destroy within the Distortion World, but it was prevented from doing so when a nearby shaman that had been scooped up in the conflict became scared and used its seed flare attack, thinking that Giratina was going to eat it. Due to the bizarre mechanics of the Distortion World, this generated a portal through which Dialga was able to escape, where Giratina was not, instead trapping it in a temporary time loop until the portal completely closed. That same shaman was later rescued by a group of young kids and asked them to take it to a nearby migration point, which is where it had originally intended to go. Shortly afterwards, however, those same children got pulled into the Distortion World by accident and came face to face with Giratina, as well as a scientist named Newton Graceland, who had apparently been studying Giratina for several years. After escaping with the shaman back into the normal world and beginning their journey towards the destined migration point, the children were attacked by a young man named Zero. Apparently, Zero was the former assistant of Newton Graceland and had left when his mentor decided to leave Giratina alone instead of copying and potentially controlling its powers. Newton had decided against such a plan because he realized that the Distortion World and the normal world were designed to feed off of each other. If one were to be damaged in any way, both worlds would suffer. Zero, however, did not understand this and merely wished to rule the Distortion World as his own little paradise without any regard to the safety of the normal world. After capturing and using the shaman's fear of being eaten by Giratina to open up a portal to the real world with another seed flare attack, Zero used his ship, a prototype device designed by his mentor, to slowly absorb Giratina's powers while simultaneously destabilizing its cellular structure. Before Giratina was completely vaporized by the energy drain, however, Newton managed to deactivate the ship. In turn, the shaman that had once been so afraid of Giratina used its aromatherapy technique to restore Giratina's health. Unfortunately, Zero was not finished and used a battle-oriented escape pod to journey back to the Distortion World before destroying many ice pillars in an isolated corner of the realm. This in turn caused a nearby glacier in the real world to begin moving, threatening the existence of many lives. This thankfully also awakened a nearby Regigigas who, accompanied by a fairly large herd of mammal swine, attempted to push back the glacier. It was only after Giratina managed to destroy Zero's escape pod, however, that there was enough time for Giratina to restore the destroyed pillars, in turn halting the glacier's advance. Afterwards, the shaman involved in the incident flew away with a small group of shaman towards an unknown destination, while Giratina returned to the Distortion World and Zero was promptly arrested by the local police force. Lastly, it is important to note the trio's role in the most climactic associated event, the Machina Town incident. Thousands of years in the past, Machina Town was a barren wasteland that could not support life at all, and the people living there were in constant agony. Although it is unknown why Arceus chose to do so, it is said in legend that it once protected the world from being destroyed by taking the brunt of a meteorite swarm, losing the 17 life plates normally carried with it in the process. While Arceus normally would have died slowly, a man from ancient Machina Town known only as Deimos rescued Arceus and nursed him back to full health. In return, Arceus used 5 of his life plates to create a powerful artifact known as the Jewel of Life, which would supposedly bring prosperity to whatever place it rested in. As such, Machina Town flourished for quite some time, but eventually Arceus returned to reclaim the Jewel of Life, only to be tricked by Deimos and sealed away. In the recent past, Arceus had begun to reawaken, sending destructive shockwaves throughout the temporal and spatial realms as a consequence, which in turn led to Dialga accidentally entering the spatial realm triggering the events of the Alamos incident and indirectly the events of the Zero incident. Eventually though, Arceus did wake up and began to destroy everything around her with its powerful judgment attack. The three original deities, namely Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, had already been feuding amongst themselves when this occurred and, with little direction from a young woman gifted with the ability to communicate with such wild beasts, began attacking Arceus in an effort to save the world. Their efforts, however, proved to be useless. Even when the young woman, who happened to be a descendant of Deimos, attempted to give Arceus the Jewel of Life, it was only infuriated further and forcibly crushed it beneath its foot, revealing that it was a fake. In a last-ditch effort, Dialga used his powers to send the young woman, along with a friend and a group of young kids, back to the past in order to reverse the events that had transpired. During the course of their journey, it was revealed to them that Deimos had not tricked Arceus intentionally, but had been brainwashed by a hypnosis technique from a Bronzong owned by ancient Machina Town's leader, a cruel man named Marcus. Through the efforts of the children, however, the attack from Marcus against Arceus was halted, and the Jewel of Life was reabsorbed into the beast before they all returned to the present. Due to Dialga fading in the meantime, however, the present had not actually changed even though the past had. It was only after a young boy amongst the group reminded Arceus of what happened that it finally calmed down and departed for its home dimension, the Hall of Origin, as did the other three back to their respective dimensions.
One can measure the power of a lot of things in the world, from the land, sea, and skies to truth and ideals and many other things, but there is almost no level of power that can equate to the universal might possessed by the members of the Creation Trio, and this is more than shown in practice. Without Dialga, time could never flow, and everything would be static and unchanging, so the very capacity of us to live our lives with progress is all thanks to its powerful beating heart. It can more than show this might in practice as well, with its roar of time being enough to shatter that which it is responsible for, almost as if it was nothing, and thus vaporize all but the sturdy divinities that stand in its way. Without Palkia, we wouldn't have the space for everything to essentially exist in, and thus nothing could ever really come to be or have somewhere to exist in outside of the most extreme hypothetical environment of existence. So its birth helps to keep the universe as a place where existence is not dictated, but just the presence of existence itself and nothing more. It also more than showed this in practice as well, as its powerful spatial wind can tear through it all and expose a void of near non-existence that renders all asunder, decimating all but the strongest of creatures that dare to go up against it in any way. And while Giratina might be perhaps the strangest member of the trio here, and its powers are relative mystery as to how they really connect to our world, it is more than clear that its home, the distortion world, is linked to the safety and well-being of our land, so for anything bad to happen there is bad for us. As such, its immense power over matter and gravity in some form or another is something to be feared, especially under the guise of the massive devastation it can unleash through its Shadow Force attack. Together, these entities are truly more than just the stuff of legends, but the stuff of creation, and more than worth revering and fearing in equal measure.
With the power on their side needed to topple the universe as we know it, that they so much as get into a serious spat with one another, the members of the Creation Trio are powerful beasts that represent the raw essence of what makes existence possible in our universe. It is unlikely that most will ever have the chance to see these powerful behemoths in real life, but if the chance ever does arise, you had best be prepared to either run or take on the avatars of true gods.
Just do yourself a favor and make sure that you're ready to tackle whatever these draconic beings can truly throw at you, or the dissolution of time, space, matter, and gravity might leave you with few options other than embracing a state of non-existence that you may never be able to return from.
Thank you all for watching this video. It always brings me great joy to see others enjoying the work I do to try and make the world of Pokemon and the fascinating creatures that lay inside of it feel as real as they possibly can. If you really enjoy my work, please feel free to leave a comment and subscribe, as I always do my best to respond to any and all comments that are left on my videos. In addition, if you wish to learn more about my work and help support it, you can find links to my Patreon page, as well as email and other contact information to my work on DeviantArt in the video description down below. Furthermore, you can find a link to my Discord server there as well if you'd like to get a first glimpse at what videos are coming up next and converse with other fans of the world of Pokemon. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, and have a wonderful rest of your day.